I want to read a short folklore story from Julius Black Folklore called How God Made Butterflies. Well, the Lord had just finished making the world, and he sat back in his big old rocking chair and looked it over. Not a bad job, if I say so myself. He lit up his cigar and was feeling pretty good about it until he noticed that the world was looking kind of bare. Fact of the matter was, there wasn't a thing to the world except land, trees, and a whole lot of water. There was even more water than land. Wonder how that happened, the Lord wondered. Seemed to me I'd planned for there to be more land than water. Well, he shrugged his shoulders and turned his mind to figuring out how to make the world a little prettier. Give me my pruning shears, he called out to one of the little angels, and they ran and got him. Then the great Lord Almighty leaned out of his rocking chair, trimmed the trees, and threw the trimmings all over the empty ground. That made the grass, the bushes, and the flowers. Now that don't look too bad, he said and leaned back again. Yes, sir, I've made a mighty pretty world. And so saying, he went to bed to rest up from all the work he'd done. Making a world ain't no easy thing. Takes a whole lot of thinking to make everything fit in place, particularly if it's something that never been done before. So the Lord went on to sleep, looking forward to getting up the next morning and admiring his world some more. The next morning, the Lord hardly had one eye open before he heard the flowers whispering among themselves. It's long down here, said one of the flowers. We were put here to keep the ground company and make everything look pretty, but it sure is mighty lonely. The Lord shook his head in disgust. Have mercy. You get through making one thing, and the next thing you know, you got to make something else to go with it. Give me them little shears, one of you angels. The angel brought the Lord the teensy pair of shears, and he bent over to the earth and started snipping little pieces of everything, the sky, the ground, the trees, the animals, the bushes, the flowers. Everything and anything he laid his shears to got snipped. The very idea of getting complaints about the world, and it wasn't even a day old. That was gratitude. And the Lord had a feeling he was going to get more complaints about the world from now on. He was so mad he didn't care what he snipped. And he snipped all morning long, snip, 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 and then he went back to bed because he didn't want to hear any more complaining about the snipping he'd done. He had a good mind to just stay in bed forever and let the world handle its own complaints. Well, when the people looked up and they saw these tiny scraps fluttering by, they called them flutterbys. There were yellow flutterbys. Those were the ones that had been snipped from the sun, and there were blue flutterbys. They had been snipped from the sky, and there were white flutterbys. They had been snipped from the stars. Every color flutterby you could think of was fluttering around. There were flutterbys fluttering around that people didn't even have names for to describe their color. These flutterbys got over to our part of the world, and well, you know how it is with us. We always got to have our way of saying something. The brother in black is going to say the thing his way or die trying. So when we looked up and we saw these things floating by, we heard some white folks call them flutterbys, and we fell out laughing. Flutterbys? White folks put their tongues through all kinds of contortions trying to talk. Flutterbys. Now, who would call them that? So we turned that thing around and called them butterflies. That sounded a whole lot better. It was easy on the tongue and easy on the ear. And that's what words were supposed to be. But white folks are something else. They never will let us have nothing our own way. If they think we having more fun than them, before God get the news, here they come wanting to get in on it. And not only that, you share it with them, and before the sun go down, that night, they're going around talking about it's theirs. So white folks started calling them butterflies too. and went on and stuck it in their dictionary, wanting people to believe they had enough sense to think of a word that pretty. Anyway, that's how the Lord made butterflies. And while you always see butterflies flying around flowers, they were made to keep the flowers company. Okay? That's a word. That is a word. For me, anyways. I don't know how that is resonating for anybody else, right? But there is something about, I think that like the story is reminding me of ease, right? Even the fact that we didn't want to contort our tongue, right? It should be easeful, easy on the tongue and easy on the ears, right? This is reminding me something too about the ways that we may feel like we have to snip parts of ourselves, right? And so in this moment, I'm reminded that even the fragments are holy, right? If you are somebody that feels like there's parts of you that are fragmented, whether this is yourself, whether this is your lineage, whether this is your inheritance, right? Even the fragments are holy. The fragments are holy too, right? But let butterflies, right, be a gift, right, to remind us that spring is forthcoming. Okay. Yes, we're at the end of winter, right? But you're going to make it through, right? The song came on earlier. You're going to live to see it happen. And I was spending some time communing with my ancestral supports, and they reminded me of this story, which is why I decided to read it, because I think that tending our inner children is really important work for our spiritual maturity, because it allows us to reclaim and retain the theologies of our childhood, right? The curiosities and the mysteries and our ways of being before we experience the conditioning and the programming around who we were supposed to believe the divine and God and ourselves to be. Okay? I hope this was a gift for you.